Hey, good morning. It's Patricia Murphy. It's Friday. This is Seattle Now. Another week in the books. Elon Musk has a deal to buy Twitter. COVID cases are ticking back up in King County, and the cruise ships are returning to the waterfront. The Strangers' Chase Burns and KUOW's Jeannie Yandel are here to break it all down. But first, let's get you caught up. City Attorney Ann Davison wants repeat offenders kept out of community courts. In a letter to Seattle Municipal Court judges yesterday, Davison says the release-first model of community court isn't effective and is the wrong place for so-called high utilizers of the system. The King County Department of Public Defense told KUOW the criminal system isn't effective either, and in many cases, repeat offenders are not competent to stand trial. The municipal court says it's evaluating Davison's proposal and ready to work with both the city attorney and public defense. Amazon stock fell after the company announced the slowest growth in more than 2 decades yesterday. Revenue was up 7%, but analysts were hoping for more. The company's investment in electric vehicle company Rivian also didn't pan out this quarter. It resulted in a total net loss of $3.8 billion after Rivian's shares lost more than half their value. And Sound Transit is relaxing its fare enforcement policies, even though fewer people are paying to ride, and they need that money to build new stations. The Seattle Times reports the agency's board approved a new approach yesterday that will give riders more warnings before fining them and keep people out of court if they don't pay. The move comes after a review found black passengers were being disproportionately cited by transit cops. The new policy will take effect next fall. Happy Friday. This week was chilly. Officially the third coldest April since 1977. It was also filled with pollen. My eyes are on fire today. My eyes are on fire. Chase Burns is here. He's the Strangers editor. Hey, Chase. Good to see you.
Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday.
And Jeannie Yandel's here. She's the co-host of the podcast Battle Tactics for Your Sexist Workplace. Hey, Jeannie.
Hello.
This week, Tesla CEO and active Twitter user Elon Musk bought Twitter for $44 billion. I think it's just over 50 in the end, probably. And here in Seattle, that might mean something, you two. Seattle Times FYI guy Gene Bulk reported, according to Nielsen, Seattle ranks second out of 112 U.S. metro areas for the percentage of Twitter users. And understandably, people have feelings about the Elon Musk deal. Chase, you're pretty active. What do you think?
You know what I first want to say is I'm embarrassed that you said I'm pretty active because I personally think we should all get off of Twitter. Obviously, that's that's an idyllic request. Like, I want to say, like, we should get off all social media and I should just see people in the streets. That's not going to happen. But... And for a while, I was like a social media manager too, and I found that my personal politics were still like, I think we should still we should all get off of these platforms. But I don't know. I know Twitter's having a hard time. They're not able to sort of make the ad model that they're pursuing work. So I know something had to happen with their leadership. This is not what I would have personally requested happen with their leadership. I also think that if Twitter is having a hard time making a digital ad model work because places like Google and Facebook are domineering, I think that is a warning to everyone else who's trying to make an ad model work like newspapers. Because, if Twitter can't make it work, how are we going to do it?
That's a good point. I mean, I don't know. My big question, I guess, is our presence on Twitter is not to sort of continue the grand experiment of free speech. It's to make sure that advertisers can get our eyeballs. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that I keep thinking about. I mean, I think I agree with you, Chase. Like, I think that everybody should get off of these platforms, except for my cousins in other parts of the country who are having babies because I want to see pictures of those babies. Like, that's basically what I find enjoyable about social media at this point. But the other voice I have in my head about this is that as somebody who hosts an independent podcast, and you probably think about this too, Chase, is that you're supposed to use these platforms, right? You're supposed to, I don't know if it's a myth or not yet, but like the idea is that you can use these platforms to sort of build your audience for the platform that you actually care about, which is the podcast that you're making. And I haven't quite figured that out yet. But as a journalist who also hosts a podcast about workplace sexism, gosh, I've been trolled a lot of times on Twitter.
Yeah.
Gosh, I've gotten a lot of threats on Twitter. I don't really see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, Twitter is a difficult place to exist if you, well, period. That's it. Because if you tweet, you open yourself up to an entire world of users, which is why I never tweet. Honestly, I'm more of a scroller. You know, I use it for news. I follow Rideshare Driver Guy on Friday nights in Florida. Really enjoy his account. Hit Astro Poets on Sunday. But my Twitter use is very minimal because I do not want that kind of interaction.
Yeah, it's so complicated. And there's like, we could have a 2-hour podcast about this one issue.
100%. Yes.
I just think, like, obviously, like you're talking, Jeannie, if you're trying to connect with an audience, this is one of the quickest ways to connect, especially with like thought leaders and sort of like micro communities as they're described. Those people are often on Twitter, but also if you've ever had like a tweet go viral, that experience is usually very negative. Like we
Yes.
think that, oh, we want to go on Twitter, we want to get a viral hit, and that's going to be like, I don't know, good for us, good for our company or whatever. And usually that experience is dreadful, because what happens is like someone quote retweets your offhanded comment, and then everyone who's reading it, it's not the whole world, it's everyone who has a passionate opinion about that one thing, and it can just create a very toxic environment. Once I said I didn't like Adam Driver, which I'm not going to get into, but I thought it was I thought it was an offhanded comment, and then Twitter like promoted it on their moments, and suddenly my entire mentions were like anyone who's ever loved Adam Driver being like, why would you say that? He is a veteran. You should go die. And I was like, I thought I was saying that to no one. So I
was just typing into my phone. I want to apologize for how I responded to your Adam Driver tweet, by the way. It was not okay.
It is fine.
I never even saw it.
This happens to me at least once or twice a week, where I tap something out on Twitter and I just delete it immediately in my mind and do not, I just never tweet. Somebody I know has that handle, and I think that's a pretty solid thing. I also wonder what's going to happen if this deal goes through and Musk introduces the edit button, like he says. Who knows what happens once we can edit? Because that's the other thing about Twitter that I think is an interesting accountability feature. If you delete, somebody has screenshot that tweet, if it matters at all, or sometimes even if it doesn't. But
yeah, and there's a whole debate around deleting and if it's responsible, especially as a journalist. I'm very pro deleting. I think like, and not in a way to hide things. I just think sometimes you're like, actually, I don't agree with that anymore, or there was like a way that I phrased that I'm realizing is being misinterpreted. I think we should all, deleting is good, not deleting actual news reports, but that's not what Twitter is.
Right.
It's full of tweets.
Right, exactly. It's full of tweets. And it's definitely raised some interesting questions about the role that Twitter is playing in our society. Is it really a free speech bedrock of a functioning democracy and a digital town square like Musk says, or is it just a pile of turds like we can all be at our worst?
I mean, so this is something that has kind of annoyed me about this whole, like, the way this narrative is playing out in the media, is that this is as though this is an actual debate with equal sides, right? like that it's like that we can sort of credibly just say that this is like a bastion of free speech, that it is, it helps with the functioning of democracy. I think that in specific instances and specific cases, we can look to Twitter and say that, it was a beneficial tool. The sort of classic case is the Arab Spring, right? But I don't think you can sort of credibly make that argument when we are talking about a for-profit corporation that exists to essentially sell our eyeballs and what we're thinking about buying to advertisers. That just keeps getting lost in this conversation. And I know why it keeps getting lost. We're never supposed to talk about the fact that this is capitalism, but it's capitalism. I don't know, maybe I'm just grumpy at this point, but it really, every time I see this sort of bastion of free speech nonsense. I'm like, it's a freaking for-profit company. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, and we're writing for it for free, you know, because they're not technically a publication and we're not technically writers for that publication. We're just kind of all on there like talking and there's certainly like connections that I've made on there that I would never, ever, ever have made without that platform. Connections that are really important to my career and being an individual. I still think I don't think it's fixable, and I'm certainly not I'm not confident that Musk would be the one to fix it, but we will see.
Jeannie, really glad you brought up the Arab Spring, because those are the best moments of Twitter, right? Where that's the global village, maybe, that Marshall McLuhan was talking about all those years ago with the rise of the internet, the best of what we could be together.
Yeah.
But
well, you know, and also the account is it Ted Danson's birthday that just every day tweets out whether or not it's Ted Danson's birthday. That's another example of when Twitter's good.
My favorite tweet of the week was when Dolly Parton happened to be trending, and I clicked on it because I just love the Dolly. And the tweet that just stuck with me was, I wish Dolly Parton had bought Twitter.
Yes.
We would all be in a better place today if Dolly Parton was taking over Twitter.
The fact that she doesn't want it tells us so many good things about who she is. Anyway.
Way to wrap it up, Jeannie. You are right. You are right. Some more COVID news this week as King County cases continue to inch up. Anthony Fauci, chief medical advisor to the president, said, it's a quote, "We are out of the, quote, full-blown explosive pandemic phase." He tempered that just a little bit by adding that we're in a transitional phase. CDC says most Americans have gotten COVID at least once. So maybe this is something behind Anthony Fauci's thinking at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I got COVID at least once during this recent wave. I just had COVID like 2 weeks ago. I'm better now. And this was my second time, I think, getting COVID. I think I got COVID in March of 2020. It's hard to know for sure. And I will say that the experience between those two COVID times was very different. Obviously, March 2020, I was like, I'm gonna die. It lasted like a whole month. It was very respiratory. What I just had was didn't affect my respiratory system at all that I could experience. And it was much easier, but obviously still knocked me out for like 5 days, and many people that I know are getting COVID right now. So it's hard to feel like we're in a transition phase when actually like most people in my circle are getting COVID for the first time.
So many people I know have COVID right now or have recently just had COVID. I'm stunned that it seems like every other day I get a text from somebody saying COVID or an email from work saying exposure.
Yeah. I mean, Chase, I had COVID a few weeks ago too. And I'm still having symptoms, which is frustrating. You know, my experience with it is not that it was particularly mild, but you know, I guess like if we're saying we're at a full-blown pandemic phase, you know, our hospitalizations are down, and that's always been the key metric, right? Is like, what can our hospitals handle? And, you know, so our hospitals have capacity right now, which is an important statistic, but still a super grim one, because, you know, if we're saying that a case is mild, if you don't end up in the hospital on a ventilator, wow, there's a whole spectrum of illness there that we're still talking about that you wouldn't be hospitalized for. You know, and unfortunately, the other structures that we have in our lives don't necessarily support you being sick for like a month. So, you know, while I appreciate, you know, that particular metric not being something that we all need to be terrified about, like, should I go to the hospital? Is there room for me? Will they be able to see me for COVID or anything else? We still have a lot of other stuff that we have to address here, you know, including, this is my favorite party thing here, like the gaping maw of what we don't know about long COVID symptoms. Like, I'm waiting for that Ed Yong from The Atlantic piece 5 years from now, where he looks back at just how badly we bungled the issue of long COVID and how that's fundamentally changed healthcare.
Yes.
So I've been in a great mood for a long time now, as you can tell.
Well, that long COVID thing sticks with me too, Jeannie. As a former health reporter, I know the varied experience people have in the medical system already without trying to present with some of the funky stuff that crops up for long COVID. Absolutely. Here's the other thing I noticed when Fauci made his comments this week. I didn't get any feeling about it. I was just like, okay, okay. You know, even when Duchin this week was like, cases are moving up, we're in the CDC's medium zone, I was like, okay. I just, I wonder if I'm just so burned out, I can't react anymore.
I think that reaction fatigue is totally reasonable at this point. I mean, my God. I think it's reasonable. I don't know. Are we bad people, Chase? I don't have any feelings either.
I'm just so flat.
We're not bad people. I heard a story. I went to the dentist yesterday, and my dentist told me about how a woman came in and she had just recovered from COVID, and he asked her how her experience was, and she was like, honestly, it was great. I didn't have to talk to my kids for 5 days. I'm not saying that that's a positive story. She should not have had to have gone through COVID. I hope she's doing well. But I think that's where we're kind of at now, and that some people are like, fine, just let it get me. And that's bad. We should not feel that way. We should not feel that way. I'm glad that she got to read books for a few days. So that's good. And that her case was mild.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing that, like, I can actually hear people in my, like, parent peer group. Not that they've said this, but I can imagine them saying this. I can imagine myself saying this too, like, which is like, you're telling me that if I get this, you're going to put me in a room by myself for a bunch of days and I don't have to do anything for anybody. Like, I can see that as a potential, you know, that comes close to a staycation, sadly, at this point,
sad.
For a lot of parents.
Very sad.
Which, again, draws out the larger issues at play here that you know, parents need to get COVID to get downtime in their lives, which is terrifying. Speaking of slowing down, we'll take it down to a cruise level now. Get out the cool weather cruise wear, people. The big ships are docking at the pier again. Cruise season is open, bringing more than 1 million people back to the city. Cruises. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Oh, man. Trish, nobody can see the grimace on your face because it's audio. I feel like that's important to call out.
Cruises.
Can I tell you the only story that sticks in my head about a cruise experience? It's my sister went on a cruise for her honeymoon, and the whole boat got norovirus. No! It was just a floating ship of norovirus. I mean, I don't actually know how economically beneficial cruise ships are to Seattle, you know, in terms of the tourist economy. So I can't speak to that piece of it. But every time I think about getting on a boat and going out in the ocean, it just feels like you're begging for some kind of communicable illness.
My follow-up to cruise season is noro season. So, yeah. You know, honestly, people like the food.
People do like the food. Well, and that I was gonna.
So does norovirus. That's the problem.
Exactly. Yeah. I grew up I'm originally from Florida, and I spent my childhood there, and so obviously it's the capital of sort of cruise ships. And I went on a Disney cruise when I was 12. And I will say I had a very positive experience on that Disney cruise because I realized as a 12-year-old, I was like, oh, no one cares where I'm going because they just assume I'm on the boat. And so there was free ice cream. I went to a play by myself. I remember being 12 and sitting in that theater and watching a Broadway level play, being like, this is what adulting is like. That being said, I would probably not go on a cruise today as an adult. So that's not really a defense of cruise ships, but I did have a good experience when I was 12.
Well,
that's awesome.
The cruise ships are huge to the local economy, right? 1.2 million people coming through on those 300 boats this season. So, you know, waterfront businesses rejoicing there. Chase, it's funny. My parents used to take me on this gambling ship from up to Nova Scotia. I grew up on the East Coast, and we'd go on this gambling ship for 2 nights up to Nova Scotia because my dad liked to play blackjack. But we had to stop because if I am on a boat, I sleepwalk, dangerously.
What?
Yeah. It's a weird thing. I have very strange reactions to the water that way. I get seasick normally, but if I'm sleeping on a ship, walking.
Your
I'm out the door.
body's trying to take you back. Your body's like, I'm not supposed to be on this water.
Anyway.
Can we have a separate episode about your parents taking you as a child on a gambling cruise? Is that like a discussion for another time, maybe?
That's another episode. We are leaving it there. Thanks to our guest, Chase Burns. He's the editor of The Stranger, and Jeannie Yandel, co-host of Battle Tactics for Your Sexist Workplace. Thanks, you two.
Thanks, Trish.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Caroline Chamberlain Gomez produced today's show. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Patricia Murphy. Talk to you Monday.